They took my name off the ledger and left me with a borrowed toothbrush. I promised myself I'd take their ledger and leave them with nothing at all. If you're reading this, you've been erased, or you felt the fingers at your throat and thought it was just a draft from a closing door. Breathe. Watch how I got it back. I used to be a senior archivist at the Directorate of Civic Memory, a skein of buildings more serve Iraq than stone, where we bound the city to its own reflection. Births, deaths, deeds, licenses, everything with a signature passed me, then sank into worm storage and iron shelves. My badge opened the third sublevel, past the blast door with a keypad that wanted 5 digits in my pulse. I could reconstruct a life from 4 invoices and a parking ticket. Power is information. Yes, but the better son 10. The morning I lost the apartment, the elevator counted to 6 and stopped. No chime. In the lobby, the concierge avoided my eyes and slid a folder over the marble as if pushing a raft to a drowning person. Eviction, he whispered. I read the stamped line. For me, 204, order to vacate premises, registry match failure. My name was wrong by 1 letter. The deed photocopy had a foggy seal. The barcode led nowhere. It was precise, almost tender. There was an email address for appeals, remedy@housing.gov. I tried to laugh. Bureaucracies do not have email addresses that sound like forgiveness. Someone's made a mistake, I said. He reached for the folder. They'll sort it. I will. I tucked it under my arm, went upstairs, and started packing the proof of my own life. Passports, too, because I worked field retrievals. A glassine envelope of title fragments, the lease, the small white box that held the security token from the old tape library. The box felt heavy, like a memory wrapped in lead. At the directorate, my badge turned green, then red. A security guard I had met once at a retirement party put a hand on my shoulder, carefully. Systems down, he said. Stay clear of the vaults. Since when? I said. He blinked. Since you filed the request to decommission them. Walk with me. I had filed no such request, but there it was on his tablet. Form CM 17, decommissioning of magnetic backup infrastructure, submitted by me last week, countersigned by the deputy director, approved. The form number was right, the routing code plausible, the signature swash matched mine, down to the bad loop on the J. We moved past a glass wall. Inside, the white librarian bot tracked along a rail and waited, head tilted, as if listening to the hum. Its name was Grace, guided retrieval and collation engine. I had named her. In my head, she blinked and kept secrets. Where's Sarah? I asked. My co-lead. On leave, the guard said. Sick mother. Sarah didn't have a mother. She had a hard drive and a safe deposit box in a different city, and called that her family tree. The guard had the script. He didn't have the annotations. The entire place glimmered with misfiled certainty. I sat on the curb outside and drew a line across a notebook page. Dispossession. Even the word has a drawer sound. Then below it, platform. What they had touched wasn't the apartment. They had touched the middleware that tells the city what exists. I tested the edges. Bank frozen. Phone. Number not recognized. Tax portal. Welcome guest. My medical records page called me by the wrong name and recommended a tetanus shot I'd already had. The more I moved, the more the system shifted just out of reach, like stepping stones shoved away by a polite boot. I needed to find the operator. Someone with access to the forms, someone who understood the interleaves between agencies where metadata nests like birds. Someone who knew my work and the vulnerabilities I used to rant about when I was tired, the unpatched authentication broker between property and civic identity, the legacy API sitting in a cabinet labeled Do Not Touch, the consulting contract we never fully audited because we never fully paid for it. I started where I'd always start, the paper that pretends to be electronic. I took the eviction folder to the records court, a fluorescent-lit purgatory above a municipal pool tiled in blue. Counter 2 had a woman named Ida who loved stamps the way some people love saints. I gave her for me, 204, watched her eyes. Pretty, she said. Too pretty. The barcode. She held it to the reader. The terminal beeped like an apology. Not issued from here, she said. The number is in the right range for our sequence, but the check digit is wrong, see? She wrote the math on a yellow sticky. Multiply by 3. Add 7 mod 10. It would pass an inattentive clerk, which is most of us. She smiled without mirth. You didn't hear from me. I slid over a second copy. Where would this be printed? Central Print Center if it's real. If it's cosplay, private shop, good paper in any case. I rubbed the beveled edge. Nice finish. Ida leaned in. You didn't bring me coffee. I'll fix that. And you didn't notice that your initials are off in the appeal email. Remedy with an E and I swapped. It's meant to be seen, and it's meant to waste you an afternoon. I wrote, they want me to chase the wrong tail. On the bus back, a girl in a red coat sat beside me and pretended to sleep. Her hand said something on my knee, a Metro card with a strip of masking tape on it, a date, and 2 letters RF. I didn't move. She got off at the next stop without turning. I waited 3 more, then did the thing I tell clients to do. I walked into a crowded cafe, asked for a glass of water, and looked under the saucer. The card was blank plastic. I held it flat and breathed on it. Letters bloomed. Not invisible ink. Grease from a thumb. The message said, RF equals room F, watch me. Room F is not a room. Room F is a file designation. F as in foreign vendor. F as in forgotten. At the directorate, the door outside room F is a utility closet with a weak lock and an exhaust hose that blows warm air in the winter. I went there at dusk, when the building's lights dim, just enough to show you which bulbs have been replaced. The lock hung open, which have died whispering. Not forced, simply tired. Inside, a rolling rack of banker's boxes, all with masking tape labels in cramped black pen. RFC 132, RFC 133. Not request for comments. Resource funding contracts, my ledger of unpaid IOUs and overpaid friends. The scent was paper and a hint of ozone. And then, a whisper, not in the air but in the metal, a laptop fan purring under the boxes. I lifted the bottom box, like a magician revealing the lemon with the coin. The laptop was ours, a directorate field unit, scraped and nicked. On the screen, a terminal with a green cursor and a single line. If you're reading this, I won. I typed, Sarah. The response came fast. No. Who? Left hand pointing at right. This wasn't a conversation. It was a script. I tried a different tack. What do you want? To show you the ledger that paid for your erasure. You have access. I have a key, Grace. I thought of the white librarian bot. A machine with a route along a rail that thought in shelf numbers and checksum verifications. If someone had flashed her firmware, she could fetch tapes out of order, inventory the vault in patterns that looked like boredom but were in fact extraction. Where? Archive Rail 3. Bring gloves. The rail only runs when the building sleeps. The rails sting you if you touch them bare, hence the gloves. I knew the pattern of the night watch, and I knew the lag on the cameras. I slipped through, pressed the override with my elbow and waited. Grace clicked down the rails and stopped where I had once taught her to stop for a demonstration, between the municipal payroll and vital statistics. Good girl, I whispered. She presented a cartridge, LTO 6, label handwritten over the original printed code. That alone was a sacrilege. Our cartridges live and die in the barcode scanner's eyes. The human hand is not supposed to write there. I took it to a maintenance bay that still had an LTO drive, because maintenance keeps everything after we decommission it. The laptop in room F had a SAS card dangling on a ribbon, cable the way a heart dangles in a clinical diagram. I clicked in the cartridge, mounted the file system, and let my throat go cold. Under a folder named Vendor Audits, 47 subfolders, each a month, each a set of PDFs, scanned invoices, delivery receipts, bank confirmations. The banks were the small kind that still mail things with foil seals. The vendors were names I recognized from the shadow side of civic work: Kestrel Consulting, Primary Mirror Limited, Black Marigold. And there, in the summaries, a set of aggregations that made me smile despite myself. The scam had style. They had exploited a floating point rounding issue in an old budgeting tool so that each invoice was off by a cent or 3 when converted across divisions and currencies. In a universe of millions, a few cents in 100 places is noise. But someone was sweeping the rounding residues into a pocket. A stream of pennies flowed uphill. I traced the routing numbers. They touched a bank in a country that does offshore honesty as a virtue. They touched a civic pension fund account whose alias was an old name for a street near my apartment. They touched, finally, an escrow line labeled Emergency City Resilience, which is the kind of name that makes you look one step to the left. There, a payment authorization series, J741, J742. The J is mine. Sarah would have teased me for the smile I didn't hide. They had used my signature block to set this up. The cheapest theft is always the one that tells you a flattering lie. We couldn't have done it without you. I texted Ida from a number that wasn't mine. Hypothetical. If one wanted the name of the person who created CM17 with my signature, who would have access logs? She replied with a sticker of a coffee cup, then, authentication broker. Legacy. Ask for the Z-Box. The Z-Box is a gray server in the corner of a room that nobody dares to turn off because nobody can turn it back on. It runs an identity bridge that our cloud vendor said, in a paragraph, they stopped supporting before the pandemic. It uses a username that begins with admin and ends with a serial number you can only read if you peel back the sticker you're not supposed to peel back. The Z-Box had dust like velvet. I typed slow. The logs were ROT13D because someone once saw that in a movie and thought it was security. I decoded the lines and watched an IP address pulse like a low, irregular heartbeat. The request came from the deputy director's office, passed through a VPN endpoint registered to a defunct public-private partnership, routed to the cloud, and then to my account. I printed nothing. Paper is gilt in a coat pocket. I took photos with a fisherman's camera, waterproof, without geotagging, with a sensor that smears just enough to keep faces soft. Then I locked Grace's rail and slept in a room that's not on the floor plan. Under an acoustic ceiling tile, on a foam mat, next to rolls of emergency signage. Exit, bathroom closed. When I woke, my phone's browser showed a single new bookmark I hadn't made, titled Remedy. The URL was a hash. The page held a single form field and a button. Tell your side. The cursor waited like a metronome for a song I didn't know how to sing. The field had a character counter in the corner, 500 words. Someone wanted me to confess in bite size. I closed it. If a trap asks you for your truth, write your truth somewhere it can't be parsed. I wrote Sarah a note in a cipher we used when we digitized the police blotters and didn't want the officers to read our jokes. Initial letters of sentences in a paragraph. Every third paragraph another key. I put it in a book I knew she would check first if she ever came back. The Theory and Craft of Document Control. Then I borrowed a car from a cousin who thinks I sell used printers, and I drove to the Central Print Center. The manager had tattoos of flowers and the quiet of someone who has learned to say no without making an enemy. I handed her form E204. Gorgeous, she said. Not mine. Whose? She spun a screen. A dashboard of job tickets, calibrated to a laser's tolerance. There are 2 facilities that can do this finish on this stock. Us, and a private contractor across the river called Proof and Grace. I looked up at the name as if it had been painted on air. Grace. Spelled like the machine. Exactly. Funny, right? The contractor's building was a former soap factory with a security desk like a boutique hotel. The receptionist wore an earpiece and the kind of smile that makes you want to apologize for making a sound. She asked for my name. I gave her the wrong one on purpose. She corrected me. Power is formats, and also is being seen when you don't want to be. Mr. Jansen, she said, you have a tour scheduled. I nodded like I had booked it after a lunch I didn't remember. The place smelled of paper and hot metal. Massive digital presses fed sheets into folders that looked like piano guts. A man in a suit that could survive a hurricane walked me past pallets of forms with county seals. He narrated in smooth paragraphs. ISO certifications, chain of custody protocols, security cameras with blind spots that he didn't say out loud. Do you print Form E204? I asked. We print for many agencies. Do you print for the Directorate of Civic Memory? He laughed without moving his mouth. We print for whoever pays on time. We stopped at a glass-walled room where a woman in gloves adjusted a plate. On the desk, a sample stack, mock-ups, where I saw the header font that had appeared on my eviction. I put my hand on the glass and counted the baseline grid. Old habits. The man looked amused. You're a designer? Archivist, I said. Different dialect. Same religion. Then you know this, he said, and tapped the edge of a form with a fingernail. A city is built from paper. The concrete is just to keep the paper dry. I left with a pamphlet that no one outside should have, full of client names obscured by felt tip marker, poorly. The marker soaked in and left halos. Behind the halos, readable letters. I took a photo, ran a histogram equalization in my head, guessed 3 names and swore soft. Kestrel Consulting. Primary Mirror Limited Black Marigold. The vendors from my stolen ledger. They were clients here, too. I stopped at a bakery to think. The woman at the counter asked if I wanted my receipt emailed. I laughed for too long. I pocketed the paper. At home, or rather, not home, I watched my building across the street while eating something with olives from a container I didn't remember buying. A mover carried my desk out in parts. The frame gleamed like bone. "You want us to leave the plants?" he shouted. "Let them die," I said to myself. That was the bottom. The next line in my notebook said, retaliation. Then it said, tell a better form. If power is a format, fight format with format. We have a tool called a reverse audit. We use it when an agency claims their records are complete, and we know, because people are people, that they are not. A reverse audit starts with outputs. The permits that got printed, the checks that cleared, the emails that went out, and rebuilds the inputs they must have come from. If you can show that the outputs require inputs they cannot produce, you make a judge lean back and sigh in your favor. I wrote a reverse audit for my own erasure, as if I were a department of one. Inputs: a forged decommissioning request, fake eviction packets, manipulation of the authentication broker, use of a contractor to print an official stock, routing of rounding residue into a slush ledger, alteration of city HR to put Sarah on leave. Outputs: removal of my access, closure of my account, a page that asked me to tell my side in 500 words. I enumerated the steps and gave each a form number because the city believes in form numbers the way churches believe in hymns. Then I filed it, not to Remedy, to the Office of Inspector for Systems Integrity, OISI, which is a small, pugnacious island on the org chart that likes to have feuds. I submitted it on paper because the OISI chief has a superstition about hands touching covers. I submitted it with a cover letter that used the deputy director's favorite phrase, for your situational awareness, but put it in the wrong place, a tell she would see and feel in her bones. I didn't call Sarah. I called her burner voicemail and said 3 words, Room F sings. At midnight, my phone vibrated against the table exactly once. A text from an unknown number, bring Grace, and a location, the municipal pool. I wore my gloves and carried a toolkit that would pass for a lo-fi magician's act, a flashlight that doesn't record, a screwdriver that will strip if it must, a set of tags that say do not operate. I went through a side door Ida swore was never locked because the lifeguards have a union. The pool water lay black. In the observation room above the water, the lights were on low. Sarah stood there, in a gray hoodie that made her look like a blur. You're not on leave, I said. Never had a mother, she said. You disappeared. I was reduced. Language matters. We didn't hug. We were never that kind of pair. We put our elbows on the metal rail like dock workers and watched the lane rope drift. You left a theater for me, I said. Room F is where things go when the story gets too crowded, she said. You always said so. Who's running this? A deputy who wants to be a director, and a vendor who wants to own the deputy. They cut a path through your profile because you were the most complete person I know on paper. The deeper the profile, the stronger the ghost. How bad? Sarah smiled. Bad enough that I tailed Grace for 2 weeks to figure out how to talk to her without the rails tattling. You had Grace pull the tapes. I taught her to walk in patterns the cameras think are calibration. She's a good girl. Bring Grace. Was that you? Sarah tilted her head. No, that wasn't me. We stood quiet while the sound of the building changed. That subtle shift spaces make when someone else enters. A man's footsteps, too slow for fear. The deputy director, flanked by 2 security contractors who had the stance of men who'd practiced standing in a mirror. Evening, the deputy said, voice of someone who had taken classes on how to be calm. You're trespassing. On a public facility. Closed for maintenance. We're the maintenance, I said. You signed our work order. She smiled. I do love a forged signature that flatters. You would. Mr. Jansen, she said, turning to the glass as if we were a display in a museum. You should know that your reverse audit made me laugh and then made me tired. We're past paper games. The problem with being very good at the old ways is that you think the old ways can do anything. I let her talk. The talkers tell you their map if you give them enough silence. We don't need to print forms anymore, she said. We only do it to keep the choir singing. The city believes in forms, so we print them, and the printer schemes. Everyone's happy. But the core of this is simple. Identity is a service. Turn it off, you vanish. Do you know how few people know where that switch is? Sarah breathed out. 2. 3. The deputy nodded. 4, including you. You're telling us the numbers, I said. Because you want to show that information is power. She shrugged, as if to say, obviously. Also because you have one of my tapes, and it's the one I care about least. I lifted my phone and pressed play. The pool speakers were cheap. The recording came out tinny. It was the deputy's voice in her office, dictating a memo. Move the consolidation forward. Label slush flow as resilience. Cut the archivist housing, so he'll spend time on appeals rather than on the ledger. Schedule the hearing on a day he can't attend. The deputy laughed. Old tricks. A recording. It's cute, one of the contractors said. Listen to the room tone, Sarah said. Hear the long beep every 11 seconds. That's not a microwave. That's the UPS in room Z when it's under load. You recorded this while you were copying logs, which means it's contemporaneous, which means it's not just cute. The deputy's eyes slid across us like a scanner reading a line of symbols. What do you want, Mr. Jansen? Your apartment back? An apology? It's done. We'll write a letter. It will be true without being correct. I want your ledger, I said. Not the one with pennies. The one with names. You can't carry it. I brought a card. Watch me, Sarah said. She moved with a speed that looked slow until you realized you were behind. She didn't touch the men. She touched the room, the light switch, which plunged us into the emergency glow that makes people less brave, the door prop, which slid and jammed, the cable that fed the camera, plucked like a harp string. The contractors raised their hands, not sure whether to reach for a gun or a phone. By the time their decisions resolved, we were gone into the maintenance corridor that runs like a vein behind the pool. We didn't have to be stronger. We had to be better at the building. This buys us 10 minutes, Sarah whispered. Grace. I called. She came. The little were rattling steel panels. She had been listening. Or Sarah had trained her to come to a whistle we couldn't hear. We loaded the tapes, not all, just enough to prove the pattern in court, and it choked the deputy's timeline. We ran to a car I had borrowed from a cousin who would be fine. He always was. And we drove not to the press, not to the bank, but to the notary with the ugly lamp. Notaries are underrated. The city disrespects them because a stamp looks quaint next to a blockchain. But a notary with a ledger and a bad lamp has put more thieves to bed than any smart contract you could name. We sat at her desk and watched her write the date and our names and the serials of the tapes, and then she pressed her seal down with 2 hands. What is it? She asked. A safety deposit box, I said. Looks like trash. Trash with a lineage. She smiled. I like that. We put the notary copy in a bank box in a bank I didn't trust but would pay to be loyal to this one thing. Then we went back to the directorate. The deputy had moved to the second act, public sympathy. A post on the intranet about how we handled a data integrity incident with transparency. An offer to help those affected. A photo of her among boxes, sleeves rolled. The text was signed with her initials and our department slogan, which I'd always hated. Memory serves. Sarah said, time for us to serve back. We submitted the reverse audit publicly, but not to the places that would read it like a novel. We filed it as a procurement complaint because procurement has knives. We attached the notary seal and the list of tapes and the photo of the proof and grace pamphlet with the client names, bleeding through felt tip. We included 4 questions. Why did a contractor print restricted forms? Who authorized the decommissioning of magnetic backups, CM17? Why are resilience funds routed through a private escrow? Which identity administrators have used the legacy Z-box by IP address and time? We sent it to the inspector, the comptroller, the council's oversight chair, and an old journalist who still buys me dumplings and says, say it clean. Then we waited in the only safe place, the rooftop above room Z. Pigeons gave us the side eye. The city spread below like paper laid flat. My life was somewhere under it. Folded, creased, restartable. The first call came from Ida. "You're either going to get an apology or a van," she said. "They're pulling the Z-box." "Tell them the power has to be cut first," I said. "Tell them the fire code requires a licensed contractor. Tell them I filed the work order." She laughed. "You're learning." The second call came from the old journalist, who did not ask if I was on the record because he always assumes you are until you say otherwise. "I ran your 4 questions," he said. 2 people sent me PDFs I shouldn't have. One shows an amendment to the proof and grace contract that lets them print emergency materials at the deputy's discretion. The other is a funds transfer from Resilience to Primary Mirror Limited, purpose line blank. "Blank is a purpose," I said. "Your apartment?" "A symptom." He was quiet. "They like you because you don't make them feel stupid. That's a dangerous hobby." I heard doors slam below. The maintenance crew had been told to move the box. They argued in the cadence of men who had learned the word indemnity. Sarah touched my arm. "You ready for the part where we stop being good? Depends on what you call good. I call it good when a city sees how it works and doesn't look away." We climbed down into the ceiling of the corridor. We listened while the deputy arrived in a vest she thought made her one of the troops. We listened while she told them to hurry. We listened while the journalist's story went live because he had promised me he would press publish when he saw the deputy's boots. The article made a sound in the building, like ice cracking in spring. The deputy gestured at the Z-box, and the camera of a contractor's phone panned by accident to the sticker with the admin serial, and my heart wanted to jump out. I did nothing. Sarah reached past me and pulled a cable I had all but forgotten, the alert line for the fire panel. It chirped. It didn't alarm. That's the trick. People don't run for chirps. But a chirp makes them look up, and while they look up, you can change the labels on the boxes. We swapped a small gray unit labeled Z with another labeled W that controls the pool filters. It was dumb theater. It was also enough. When the deputy carried Z to the elevator, she was carrying the wrong heart. She would not know until she performed the ritual, and the ritual failed. Rituals failing make believers angry. Sarah nudged me. "You're still a romantic," she said. "You like the choreography too much." "I like it when the building helps," I said. It took 2 days for the comptroller to demand a public hearing. It took 2 hours for the deputy to realize her box was wrong. It took 2 minutes for me to stop flinching at every car that slowed down on the street. We ate bread in an empty conference room and built a trap. The trap was simple. We would restore my identity in a way that made any attempt to erase me cause a second failure visible and loud. I wrote a script that generated redundant updates. Every time my profile changed an identity, it would write a hash of a change to the payroll system, the HR directory, and the library card database. If the hashes didn't match, the systems would dim the lights. Literally. I had a friend in facilities who liked to play. We called it the canopy. A city is safer when it knows when someone shakes a branch. We got one friend to plug it in, Ida. She stamped a form that invented a maintenance window. Sarah convinced Grace to nudge the backup scheduler so that the right tapes mounted themselves as if they missed us. I took a shower in a bathroom with a "Do Not Use" sign and felt human again. At the hearing, the deputy brought charts with arrows. The comptroller brought a lawyer who asked questions like a locksmith works at tumblers. The oversight chair brought her eyebrows, which do half her work. The deputy insisted she had acted within authority. She spoke of resilience. She spoke of modernization. She used our words in a different order. "Did you authorize the decommissioning of magnetic backups?" the lawyer asked. I approved a staff recommendation. "Which staff?" She hesitated. "Mr. Jansen." "And where is the form?" She slid CM 17 across. The lawyer held it up. "The check digit is wrong," he said. "Multiply by 3. At 7 mod 10. It's lovely." The room shifted. The deputy's posture changed by millimeters, the way a flag droops when the wind stops pretending. "Who sent you the wrong Z-box?" he asked. "My team." "And who ordered the contractor to print form E204? Emergency procedures. By whose definition?" She caught herself. Until then, she had been telling a story that worked when we weren't in the room. Now we were in the room. That's a different format. I stood at the back, hands clean, hair bad. Sarah watched the deputy's eyes. When the question came, Mr. Jansen. Did you? I stepped forward. I have a better story, I said. We used to say memory serves. Today we say service remembers. We built a canopy. If you erase me, the lights dim. If you erase anyone else, the lights dim. Ask facilities. The facilities man grinned. The lights went down and came back up in a heartbeat. People laughed, nervous, then relieved. I put the tapes on the table and the notary's seal next to them. I handed the proof and grace pamphlet with the bleeding names to the chair. I handed the procurement complaint with 4 questions to the lawyer. Then I said a sentence I had written 3 times and thrown away twice. You don't need to trust me. Trust the format. The lawyer read the serial numbers. The deputy tried to look unimpressed. The city watched itself. The fallout took a week and then a season. The deputy resigned to spend more time with a family that did not exist on paper until someone created it for her, and then the paper became truth. Proof and Grace lost the contract and rebranded to Evidence and Mercy, which fooled exactly no one. The rounding residue paid for the pool tiles to be fixed and for a union raise that made the lifeguards learn my name in case I fell in. I got my apartment back with a letter that said we regret the confusion. I framed it in the bathroom, next to the do not use sign I had stolen, because theft is a word with edges. Grace got an update that made her a little slower but harder to seduce. Sarah got a promotion she said she didn't want and took anyway, because sometimes agency is a key card. The last thing I did was pick up the pamphlet with the clients and put it in room F, which is real now because I made it. It is a room where we put the things that will not survive the daylight but must be kept for when the light breaks. The label reads forgiveness, because I am trying. Before I close, a small payoff for those who care about the tiny details. The Metro card with RF? It got me into the turnstile at the courthouse on the day of the hearing when my badge still didn't work. I kept it in my pocket like a saint. If you're reading this and you've been erased, you need a notary with an ugly lamp, a friend in facilities, and a librarian who loves rails. Write your own reverse audit. Use numbers. Carry gloves. Don't confess to fields that ask you to be small. The city looks different now. The lights dim sometimes and the pigeons don't startle. The canopy works. People manage to become harder to erase when the building remembers their shape. And in a drawer under my sink, wrapped in a glassine sleeve heavy as lead, lies the small white box with the security token. I kept it. The ledger I took from them is not money. It is names. It fits in the palm of a hand, and it hums when the power moves through it. They took my name off the ledger once. I took their ledger, and now it keeps our names. I should have felt clean. Instead, the city's air seemed to stick to me. Victories leave a film. 2 mornings after the hearing, my browser changed its homepage to the remedy form again, like a dog that finds its way back, no matter where you drop it. The counter still said 500 words. But now there was a second number. Participants, 837. The supply of souls is infinite when the box promises absolution. I typed the URL by hand into a clean machine that has never met a network and stared at the code like an old friend who owes you money. The page loaded from a content delivery network registered to Primary Mirror Limited. The certificate was valid, the Hoisbear. The form wrote to a bucket, named with a hash that began with 741. The J again. They wanted me to see it. They wanted me to try to shut it down, and when I did they'd say, the archivist hates the public's voice. What's the play? Sarah asked, reading over my shoulder while eating a bagel with surgical focus. Participants are data sources, I said. They're building a confession corpus. Every 500 words is a mapping of fear. They'll use the language to target the next erasures. So don't feed it. We won't. But we'll mark it. Watermark. Checksum. I wrote a script that didn't touch the site. It touched the language. We wrote a list of phrases people use when they think describing will save them. For the record, to be clear, I did everything right. I just followed the instructions. This must be a mistake. We computed hashes of those phrases concatenated with the time of day rounded to the nearest 11 seconds, a nod to the Z-Box's beep, and we put the hashes on flyers that looked like notices from the city about garbage collection changes. The flyers said, if you're reading this, keep your story. Tell it to a person with a lamp. We posted them under the lamps of notaries across the city. And then we did the other thing. We fed Remedy a handful of stories that were true in their bones but wrong in their skin. We salted them with phrases whose hashes matched the ones on our flyers. We wanted to make a shadow in their data that we could pull on later like a thread. You're poisoning their well, Sarah said. I'm making their model remember its own origin, I said. There's a difference. Ida sent a photo of one of our flyers with a stamp on it. Official, she wrote. The deputy didn't fade, so much as she blurred. Her replacement used different words but the same format. Proof and Grace held a press event in a white room where the mics had covers like winter hats. Their CEO smiled the smile of someone who does not fear archives. Evidence and Mercy, he said, is committed to rebuilding trust. Our Remedy platform is a public square for narratives. We will never delete your words. He thought that line was beautiful. I felt sick. Want a tour? Sarah said. Of the public square. Of the server racks behind it. Primary Mirror kept the Remedy servers in a co-location facility on a block where buildings pretend to be other buildings. There's a blank facade, a vent, a door that looks like it leads to an empty stairwell. The guard at the desk read a novel in a language with a lot of diacritics. Delivery, Sarah said, wheeling a battered flight case that contained Grace's baby, a diagnostic unit that thinks it has the right to be anywhere. The guard scanned a paper manifest we had printed on stock from Proof and Grace's press, with the right dot pattern in the margin that camera software trusts as a friend. He waved us to the freight elevator. Inside the cage, Sarah pressed a button twice, not because that did anything, but because it made her feel like she had a rhythm. We emerged into air that is not air. It is conditioned memory, CO2 scrubbed and chilled until you can smell the money. The racks wore company names like vanity plates. Primary Mirror had 3 aisles. We rolled to the one that matched the serial notation I had seen in the code. At the end of the aisle, a crash cart with a keyboard still wrapped in plastic waited like a confession booth. 15 minutes, Sarah said. 10, I said. I like the way you believe in me, she said and popped the case. Grace's baby plugged into the out-of-band ports and blinked in a sequence that says, "Hello, I am a friend of your friend." The top of rack switch whispered back. We weren't in yet. We were in the vestibule. I typed with gloves because the room is cruel. The Remedy cluster ran containers named after composers. Handel had the web front end. Bach had the API. Vivaldi wrote backups to the bucket with a hash that began with 741. No firewall blocks on the management plane. Hypermodern carelessness. Find their honor, I said. Find their hunger, Sarah said. We found a service account key named caretaker, 741.json sitting in a directory called /tmp because someone once debugged something and forgot to clean up. We did not take it. We looked and memorized like monks. Then we moved up a level and found the toaster, a cron job that, every night, took the stories in the bucket and ran them through a classifier that assigned a risk score based on how likely you were to fight back. High-risk stories went to a folder called Ash. Low risk went to Mercy. What's Ash? I asked, which is a sentence I would not have believed I would say. Suppression list, Sarah said. They'll target those people first. Cut their access before they try to do anything. And Mercy! Offers of help. Help with what? Becoming smaller. We did not scream. Screaming would have made us noticed by the air. We did something harder. We made notes like archivists. The sting needed a reveal that would survive the city's appetite for forgetting. It needed signatures, numbers, predictable processes. It needed an OISI that had read our first report and had a taste for more. It needed a judge with a ledger older than ours. We wrote a second reverse audit, this time for Remedy. Inputs, service accounts left in temp directories, cron jobs that call classifiers, buckets named with our initials. Outputs, narratives sorted into Ash and Mercy, contracts extended, erasures optimized. We gave it a form number I invented out of spite and beauty. FI 11, failure of infrastructure revised. We left the racks exactly as we found them. On the way out, the guard put a fingerprint on the manifest. I smiled at the smudge. Back at the directorate, Sarah put her feet on my desk, which had made it home again. Third act incoming, she said. False victory was the hearing. The deeper thread is the square. Then the fourth act is public, I said. I don't do public. You do patterns, I said. I'll do public. The OISI chief, whom I will call Mariana because she is fond of ships, required two things before she would act: a demo that didn't look like a magic trick, and a story she could tell a council member who thinks an algorithm is a soup. We built both. The demo was for facilities. I wired a small device the size of a deck of cards into the lighting panel of the council chamber. Ida stamped a work order. The device listened to an MQTT topic the building uses to talk to itself when it thinks we're not listening. We wrote a tiny script that would listen for one thing: a delta between the hash recorded by Remedy when a person pressed Tell Your Side and the hash recorded by the canopy when their identity changed in identity. When those diverged, the device would flick the lights. No magic, just mismatch. The story was for Mariana. It started with a receipt. We carried a stack of proof and grace forms into her office and laid them down like a card game. Multiply by 3, Sarah said. At 7, mod 10. Mariana did the math on a legal pad. She smiled, same way Ida had. Pretty, she said. Too pretty. We told her about Ash and Mercy. Mariana stared at the ceiling for a long time and then said, "You're making me think the old crimes were kind." She signed the order for a seizure that would survive 3 judges. She scheduled a council briefing. She told us not to be in the room because she wanted plausible deniability. We ignored her for a reason that will sound sentimental. I wanted to watch the building remember. I wanted to stand under the canopy and feel the power flip. The day they announced Remedy, the chamber was full. The CEO of Evidence and Mercy wore the same hurricane-proof suit. The new deputy director tried to look less like a deputy. Mariana sat like a lighthouse. The council member who thinks about soup beamed at his staff. I stood in the back, next to the door, with the fisherman's camera and my hands empty. Sarah was in the control room with the deck of cards device and a bag of pretzels she eats when she's nervous. The CEO spoke about trust. He spoke about never deleting your words. He spoke about mercy in public squares and the glory of confession. He said platform, as if it were a word you could serve on a plate. Mariana let him finish. Then she asked quietly, "What happens to the story sorted into ash?" He tilted his head like a bird who has seen itself in a window. "We do not sort. Your cron job does," Mariana said, and read the path from memory /cron.daily/remedy_classifier. It writes to buckets Ash and Mercy. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I know you don't know," she said. "That's the problem." She gestured to the facilities man who leaned on the rail, enjoying himself. He pressed a switch that should not have existed. The canopy woke. The lights dimmed in a slow, undeniable wave. "What is this?" the soup council member said, as if the room were an author doing a flourish he hadn't approved. "It is the building recording a mismatch in our story," Mariana said. "It is a ledger with switches. It is service remembering." The CEO smiled at a small unlicensed thing. The deputy reached for her phone and remembered in the same moment that phones cannot help you in a room where the light is telling on you. "We did not arrest anyone. That is not the job. We did something better and worse. We made a record." The seizure came that evening. YSI walked into the colo with a judge's order and asked nicely, which is their favorite kind of asking. They took Vivaldi and Handel. They left Bach running because shutting it off would erase the logs we needed, and Mariana has a superstition about hands touching covers that matches Aida's. The guard with the diacritics put his hand on the manifest again. 2 smudges. 2 fingerprints. Paper's memory. The next day, Primary Mirror's lawyers filed something with too many adjectives. The day after, a woman who said she worked at Proof and Grace sent me a note from a throwaway account. "We used to print diplomas. Now we print exit letters." I walked to the river and stood on the bridge where the cities, 2 of us looked like they might forgive each other. I held the small white box with a security token. It hummed. I thought about throwing it in. Sarah would have said that was drama. She would have been right. Instead, I went to room F and opened a new box. The label, Remedy, with the letters slanting because my hand was tired. Inside, I put the manifest with the guard smudges, one of our flyers, a notarized copy of FI 11, a printout of the cron job path in a shaky hand, and the bagel wrapper Sarah left on my desk because it had a grease map of a morning when we decided to poison a well to save a city. There is no pure victory. There is only more careful memory. Sarah knocked on the doorframe. "They're offering me a department," she said. Anomaly response. Sounds like a comic book. It sounds like the job we already do, but with fewer windows. Take it. You'll be bored. I'll build rooms, I said. Watch me, she said softly. The echo was hers now. I liked that. We made one last visit to the notary with the ugly lamp. She was eating soup that smelled like a holiday. We put the seizure order and the canopy schematic in front of her. She wrote the date, our names, the serials, pressed the seal. What are you calling this one? She asked. Canopy, version 1.1, I said. Multiply by 3, add 7, mod 10. She cackled. You're cute, she said, and affixed a red ribbon with a pin that probably wasn't regulation. When we stepped outside, a boy was putting up a poster across the street for a show I will not see. He used a brush to smooth the paper, and the paper took on the shape of the wall, and the wall took on the shape of the story it would hold until the rain said otherwise. I put my hand against the bricks and felt, absurdly, the city breathe through my palm. I have one last procedural note, because that is my religion. The container registry at Primary Mirror had a tag we didn't talk about at the hearing. Caretakers, 742 latest. It pointed to an image that differed from caretaker, 741.json by one thing. A migration script to move the ash folder to a cloud region with a legal regime friendlier to amnesia. The checksum of the image was the same except for a single bit. They almost got away with it. We wrote the bit on the wall. Later, much later, the council passed a policy that said, no platform that asks for a person's story may calculate a score without that person seeing the score and the rules that make it. They called it the rule of lamps. I laughed in a meeting, couldn't help it. Mariana glared at me, then smiled. You want a restoration? Here it is. In the lobby of the directorate, under the LED letters that still say memory serves because the budget is slow, we installed a small glass case with a cheap lamp. People come and tell their stories to a person. We stamp a paper copy. We scan it. We hash it. We put the hash in a ledger that's public and boring. We send them home with a copy that smells like ink. Sometimes I stand there and hand out pens. The pens go missing. That's how I know we're alive. I never filled out the remedy field. I never gave them my 500 words. I gave them this, instead. A canopy, a ledger with switches, a room that hums. The city is clumsy, and it will make new mistakes. It will forget and remember. But when someone tries to take a name off the ledger now, the lights dim, and a notary looks up, and a librarian rolls along a rail. If you're reading this, and your name has slipped, find the lamp. If the lamp is off, flick the breaker. Service remembers. We taught it. I keep the small white box under the sink because I'm scared I'll become a person who worships it. Some nights I take it out and press my thumb to it. It hums, just like before. Outside, pigeons settle on the canopy and tuck their heads under their wings. A bus sighs at a stop. Somewhere, a guard adds a new smudge to a manifest. The city turns the page. They took my name off the ledger. I took their ledger. Now it serves.